So we want to welcome everyone for coming to the ISCORE 2022 conference.
So we'll start off with the land acknowledgement. I apologize if I butcher any of this. We would like to begin this event with the land acknowledgement. Iowa State University is located on the ancestral lands and territory of the Baksuji or Iowa Nation. The United States obtained the land from the Mescawi and Sauk nations in the Treaty of 1842. We wish to recognize our obligations to this land and to the people who took care of it, as well as to the 17,000 Native people who live in Iowa today. Welcome. So our presentation is on whether people care about Black Lives Matter or if their activism is disingenuous. My name is Dawood Ghauri. I'm a senior in computer engineering.
My name is Yahan Chang. I'm also a senior in mechanical engineering. And then we also had a third teammate, Nidia Garcia-Rodriguez, and she was a junior in kinesiology, but unfortunately she couldn't be here. She's not passed away. She just had an emergency. That sounded bad, but yeah. Okay, so this is our agenda for today's presentation. First, we'll go over the purpose, and then we'll do a brief background into the definitions and examples, and then we'll have an interactive aspect to it where we test our knowledge with Kahoot. And then finally, we'll go into the Iowa State survey that we surveyed, and then we'll discuss the results that we received as well as a discussion, and then end with a reflection and conclusion.
So what is our purpose at ISCORE? Why are we presenting? We are people of color. We're scholars. We're members of the Gen Z. We want to make use of our voices and make change and engage in discussions that may otherwise make most people, uncomfortable. So yeah, we're trying to bring awareness, show our solidarity for the oppressed and marginalized groups. And we want to use our voice to help in any way possible and also engage with everyone else to do that.
Okay, so how are we making change with our presentation? Well, first, this is a student-led project and we're doing student-led research. And then we also attended the ISCORE, the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity over the summer. So we got to see a wide range of students, faculty, and staff present about their own issues on campus. And then finally, we're also bringing attention to the Iowa State community with the research that we're doing.
So our main research purpose, so we seek to identify and understand different types of performative activism and allyship, and also be able to differentiate between both those. We want to look at the Iowa State University student body, the faculty, the staff, and then see how their perceptions are on those two terms. And then we want to look at other numerous facets contributing to those in the US as well.
Okay, so before we dive into the background, we kind of want to ask the audience, have you guys heard of these terms before? And then what do they mean to you? So I'll give you guys a moment to think. And then if anyone wants to bravely volunteer their thoughts, that would be great.
Talk amongst yourselves if you'd like.
Okay, so would anyone like to share what they just discussed?
I think performative activism is, I can use an example better than I can define it, but like say you're with a group of friends and you are, I wouldn't say pretending, but you are speaking on topics out of avoiding from seeming like a bad person, or like posting on social media because you want to save face, or like protect your own image. And if something popular or something big is happening in the world, just sticking with what everyone else is focused on as well. Maybe.
That's really good. Yeah. And so it's that sort of like disingenuous engagement and trying to ally with those folks. Yep, definitely.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing. And then we're gonna move on to the next slide, but keep this in mind, and we can also continue discussing this like during lunch and stuff like that. Okay.
Okay, so some definitions of these terms. So now that you've thought about it, so performative activism, it's where you're trying to increase your social capital, you're allying with these movements, you're devoting themselves only at a surface level, and there's often a term called selectivism that's brought up. So like Kira said, exactly, you're not genuinely involved in the subject or in the movement. And so similarly, but differently, performative allyship is where you're not looking at movement specifically. You're still being disingenuous in how you are engaging in these discussions, how you're talking with these people, but you're doing it just for your own gain or the social gain.
Okay, so we specifically wanted to look into performative acts throughout the Black Lives Matter movement, specifically in the summer of 2020. So first off, the Black Lives Matter movement is a movement that highlights injustices and inequalities against Black people, such as high-level murders regarding George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Daunte Wright. And then, since the height of that summer, companies and individuals and organizations have increased their performative activism and allyship through unproductive impacts and inauthentic change.
So some background on George Floyd. The murder occurred on May 25th, 2020. A convenience store employee, they called 911 telling police that Mr. Floyd had bought cigarettes with a counterfeit bill. And when the police officers arrived, they pinned him unconscious. And I'm sure we've seen videos, when this happened circulating on social media, and it was a tragic event. So Derek Chauvin, the main police officer behind it, he was sentenced to 22.5 years in prison for charges of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter.
Okay, so the murder of Breonna Taylor occurred on March 13th in the summer of 2020. Officers had linked her into a narcotics investigation, but it was actually 10 miles away from her home. So they raided her house, and then her boyfriend started firing because he thought it was actually a burglar. But then she unfortunately was caught in the crossfires and fatally shot.
And then background on Daunte Wright. The murder occurred on April 11th, 2021. Mr. Wright, he was pulled over in the afternoon for a simple traffic violation for expired registration tags. And after the police attempted to detain him, he stepped back into his car, and there was a struggle with the officers. Recently, this came up. Kim Potter, she was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 2 years in prison.
Okay. So now that we looked into performative activism and allyship, their definitions, we want to see specific examples that occurred.
So here's a few examples of performative allyship. I don't think the image on the top left really needs much explanation. So that was a TikTok video, and I believe it was an Instagram post on the right. And then on the bottom left, there was a movement for Black Lives Matter that happened, and there was a bunch of people, especially top organizations and celebrities, that were like, "Hey, in support of Black Lives Matter, we want to do this thing called Blackout Tuesday." And so all over Instagram, you would see like this wall of black. And while the intent of that could have been good, right? There were a lot of people, especially because these celebrities and like big organizations were promoting it. It caused a lot of other people to sort of jump on the wagon, to so to say, like, because they wanted to fit in, or again, for that sort of social merit. And so this drowned out a lot of the real communication about Black Lives Matter from other social accounts that were trying to get that out. And on the right-hand side, this is a company called Ports 1961, and they released a new clothing line where they basically reappropriated Black Lives Matter, and they're showing only love matters. So.
Okay, so some examples of performative activism. From the top, you see a lady who got out to help fix the store that was damaged during the protests of Black Lives Matter. But then after she took this photo for social media, she immediately got back in the car and drove away. And then this other example down here, there's a popular magazine and YouTube channel called Bon Appetit, and they highlight cooking. So they posted on their social media that they support Black Lives Matter, and they'll do their best to like highlight creators that are Black. But then a few moments later, it was found that their chief editor actually did brown face, and then there has been a lot of like racial discrimination within the company too. So even though they might post these things on social media and like say they're in support, that doesn't necessarily mean that's their true intention.
All right, so we thought we'd do some engagement here. So we're gonna do a Kahoot quiz. So we'll get it set up here, and if you could get your phones out, log in.
Also, there will be prizes for the top 3 people, so get competitive.
Oh yeah, I guess we could talk about them real quick. So there's 3 prizes. We won't do it like, if you're the first, second, third, like there's a specific prize, just come up, whatever, because everything will mean different to different people. But I have a handbag here from a creator that is an African-American woman by the name of Blue. She's based in North Carolina, and she custom designs these bags, and they're pretty cool. There's a book called Black Empowered Girl by MJ Fierve, and it's about like a lot of the innovators, Black women, and sort of the inspirational quotes. And a little tumbler, actually I don't know what this is called, by Goldmine and Coco. So.
Also, disclaimer, if you're a person who's like on Zoom, I don't know if we would be able to give you the prize unless you came to Iowa State.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, sorry
Um,
about that.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to limit it to. If you do win and you're on Zoom, yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Okay. For the sake of time, we're just gonna start here. Sorry if you didn't make it in.
All right, so first question, what is allyship? So in case you can't read, person with power or privilege, supporting a marginalized group, uniting for common resources, state, formal, I can't read this, never mind. No time.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, the second question is, which of these is an example of allyship?
All right. Performative allyship is supporting the BLM movement for stealing ideas for Black content creators, supporting the LGBTQ plus community on social media but saying homophobic slurs, letting others say racial slurs about their friends behind their backs, or all of the above.
Okay. Good job, everyone. Okay, we'll see who's making up there. Lisa's in the top. Okay, all the aspects of being an ally are necessary except okay, we did really good on that one.
Nice.
Still Lisa's undefeated.
What purpose does allyship serve?
What is performative activism? Don't give up.
Oh, what do people that practice performative activism want to achieve? Could be any. Good job, everyone.
There's some contention here. Okay, what is an example of performative activism?
Which of these options represents real activism?
A new challenger emerges. Okay.
Social media activism is not always a good way to be an activist. Selectivism is a term used to describe a person who contributes with minimal effort for their satisfaction.
Okay, and then this is a bonus question.
Wonder who out there knows. Nice.
Okay, let's see who the winners are. Ashley,
Ashley in third place.
Lisa, and then finally, Bree.
Bree.
Yay! Okay, please feel free to come up after our presentation to pick up your prize. I'm just gonna close. Okay. So after discussing what exactly is performative activism and allyship, we kind of want to direct our research into Iowa State.
So the methods for our search, the purpose was to survey the Iowa State community and look at their generalized views on performative activism and allyship, both on campus and off campus. We had a survey, multiple choice, and open-ended questions. Our sample size was 23, and it consisted of both staff and faculty and students. And the list was, the survey was sent to 3 main lists: the McNair program community, TRIO student support services, and the ISCORE community.
Okay, so our first question that we asked was, have you ever heard of one or both of these terms? So an overwhelming majority of the respondents that we surveyed said that they've heard of both. And then our second question was, do you think that there was an increase in performative actions during BLM in 2020? And again, majority did say yes, and then we had one participant that said unsure.
So we also had a question about whether they have witnessed people being performative of their activism or allyship. There were 15 people that said both, so they have witnessed it both on campus and off campus, and there were only 8 people specifically that said they've only seen it off campus. For the second question, for the duration of our as a student, faculty, or staff member, do you think the university's administration has displayed any signs of performative activism or allyship in its interactions with the Iowa State community? And an overwhelming majority, actually everyone there, said they had. I'm reading this wrong, I'm sorry. 52% said both. 13 said they've seen specifically performative allyship. And then, yeah, 35 said they've seen performative activism. And then, yeah, so no one said neither. So they've all seen that in the administration.
Okay, so then we moved on to our free response question. So the question that we asked in the survey was, why do you think people partake in performative actions based on what you have witnessed? So these are some of the responses that we received, and I'm just gonna read a few of them off, but generally most of the survey respondents, it fell within the theme of these quotes. So first one is, people in big organizations do so to avoid criticism. Organizations also resort to this to boost publicity in hopes of profit benefits. They don't want to be viewed as X or Y. For example, if they don't participate, they don't want others to think that they're racist, homophobic, etc. Also, for self-serving interests to appear as woke. And then white people aren't directly / personally impacted by racism, social injustices, or the dangers that POC experience. Educating oneself to act beyond performative actions takes time and effort, and think And I think a majority of people are lazy and only focus on this that directly affect the comfort of their own lives.
So the second question that we had was, what do you think some of the consequences can be from these performative interactions? One person said that it leads to a lack of trust, that the people from the marginalized identities, they encounter these performative actions from people who claim to be allies, and then so that relationship can be damaged. And so another person said that there's misinformation, lack of accountability. Another said that there's negative impacts that can result in more trauma and discrimination. And it masks. So another person said that it masks the racism on campus. And I think that's very important because it shows that, you know, there's a lot of folks who say that they care, but they're not being genuine. And so, and then the last one, they claim the works of others and they don't give credit where it's due.
So our final question is, how can we avoid performative activism / allyship at Iowa State? And then what are some solutions to this problem? So some people said we need to educate people better on how to actually support communities. We need to require actions and outcomes accountability. We also want a deeper understanding of the impacts of the policies and procedures that Iowa State implements. We also want to listen to issues of people of color experiencing, as well as avoid only making statements from the university specifically when there's a social expectation that they should be more proactive than reactive. As well as there needs to be action taken against hate speech and other acts of violence against minority groups. We should not be taking courses on the First Amendment just for the university to say that hate speech is okay. And this is a disclaimer that a lot of the resources on campus isn't necessarily bad. We're not saying everything on campus is performative or performative allyship. It's just saying we need to actually deep dive and look to see if the procedures and the policies that we're implementing, if they're actually effective and productive to the whole entire movement that we're talking about.
Okay, so we wanted to look at some of the university-wide emails that were sent out and just sort of understand the timeline. So how things have gotten from November 7th of 2019 and going on to 2021. So there was an email sent out in response to the Students Against Activism demands, the group on campus, the Students Against Racism, I'm sorry. And there was a response from the administration about how to address this. And the main response was to have a bunch of training sessions for the staff, right? And so, you know, there's training for the campus leaders, the president, the senior vice presidents, deans, et cetera. And they'll receive diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And so what we wanted to highlight here is that these trainings aren't bad, right? They're good to have. They're good to supplement the real work that you should be doing, to keep doing active work to make sure you're being inclusive of people. And having all these trainings from a pedagogical perspective, it does do its goal of just, you know, informing people or exposing people to that information, but beyond that, it doesn't do much. So it needs to be a supplement, not the main action. So this was November 7th of 2019. We're looking at these emails primarily because they're the main way that the university communicates with the students, faculty, et cetera. So second one, and this stood out to me a lot. So there's an email about Juneteenth. So this was June 18th, 2020, right? So there was a quote that I took from here that it said, Juneteenth is a day of celebration. And I think that should be transformed to say something like Juneteenth is a day to commemorate. Because I think there's more power in your voice when you're using a verb versus a noun, right? You're saying that you're going to continue doing work in this. You're not going to, it's not a one-time celebration. It's not a one-time event. And additionally, in that email, there was a quote down here that said, it was a quote taken from a protesters poster, and it said, we said, Black Lives Matter, never said only lives matter. We know all lives matter. We just need help with hashtag Black Lives Matter for Black lives are in danger. And from an administration perspective, I can understand that perhaps it's important to cater to the predominantly white population here at Iowa State University. But by quoting this quote specifically, that includes that all lives matter statement, you're diminishing the voices of those that that the Black Lives Matter is important to. So I thought that was very important to highlight. Conversely, this was done the following year, in June 18th, 2021. And I thought this was amazing. So this was sharing a piece from a guest essay that was written by Dr. Toya Younger, and it was about her cousin, Opal Lee. And what was amazing about this is that it allowed us to not just look at it, like look at Juneteenth from the outside, but we actually got to engage. We got to see the perspective. We got to read words that were, important for Dr. Toya Younger. And I think by doing this, we were actively participating, not passively observing. And lastly, if you went a few months back, I also thought this was amazing. So the day of when the Derek Chauvin trial ended and he was convicted, there was, this was sent out that day. And I love this last paragraph. It justifies and accepts people's pain as real and their fears as real. And especially this last statement, it's very concise, it's direct to the point. There's no going around the bush, right? There isn't, you're not catering to that other population. You're just saying directly that this is real and that their pain is real. And I think that's very important to do. So, so there's a lot of great work being done. And, over the years, in our time as students, there's a real potential for Iowa State to keep doing great in this, with respect to this.
Also, I would like to add on that it's not like dismissing what other people are doing or like their advocacy or their help for different movements across campus. It's just phrasing it in a mindset of like, what is this like actually helpful, or is it just like a band-aid to like solve the problem but not actually address it beyond just like surface value?
Right.
Okay, so before we conclude our presentation, we kind of wanted to go into a reflection. After hearing everything today about performative activism and allyship and knowing the definitions and then seeing examples during the Black Lives Movement and then specifically receiving feedback from students on campus, these are some questions that I want everyone to just like keep in mind and keep thinking about even after this presentation ends. So how can an individual's activism or allyship be productive towards a movement? What should we do to keep the momentum and activism of a movement going after the media attention has died down? And then lastly, are our true intentions upheld by our actions? Because even if you're not in like an administrative role or you have like an organization, we can still keep these thoughts in our mind throughout everything that we're doing daily. And then if anyone wants to share their thoughts on this, that would be great too. I'll let everyone still like talk amongst yourself for a moment, and then we'll ask if any volunteers want to speak. Also, for those people on Zoom, feel free to like write in the chat too. I haven't been ignoring it. Okay, so does anyone want to share what they were discussing? Two of our, oh, okay.
Like this morning when our speaker quoted Maya Angelou, and it's like, do the best you can until you know better and then do better. I think like just continually opening our perspectives, listening to all people of all different backgrounds, and then once we learn, like doing that better and being intentional about doing better.
For sure, for sure. Being actively engaged and knowing that you know what your true intentions are behind what you're doing. Definitely.
And I think just everybody showing up to ISCORE, whether online or in person, is non-performative, and it's a sign of like you're actually wanting to put in the work and actually want to learn.
Definitely. Each and every person that attends this is showing that they're actively participating, that they care, and so.
Does
Yep.
anyone else want to share, either on Zoom or in person? I can read out the chat too. Also, two of our participants that won the Kahoot are in person, so they just said to give the prizes to whoever's in the room. So if you share, maybe you could get a prize.
I think too in the year 2022, most people have access to internet or a library. And so really just taking responsibility of your own education rather than leaning on, colleagues of color or friends to ask them, to inform you because they are already carrying enough weight on their shoulders and it's really not their responsibility to inform us white people. So just utilizing those resources to continue to do better.
Yep. Definitely agree.
Also, we had a chat in the Zoom a bit ago that said, I've seen examples where white folks don't actually contribute to the conversation, but rather speak up in the comment sections just so others can see they're involved in the discussion. So I also wanted to talk about that too and make sure no one's getting forgotten on Zoom because there's a lot of people on there.
Any other responses?
Okay, if there's no other responses, please just keep this in mind throughout like your day and throughout your work that you're doing. And we can also continue talking about this over lunch too. Okay, so in conclusion, after doing our research for ISCORE, we concluded that it's very important to identify forms of performative activism and allyship to ensure that the integrity and intent of the movement is upheld. And the community at Iowa State plays a big role in the development and mobilization of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then lastly, administrative level communication and addressing of incidents plays an important role in the inclusion of all members of the community. So that's the end of our presentation. Thanks everyone online and in person for coming. And then we'll also take questions. And then this is our contact information if anyone has any further questions. And then please evaluate our presentation on the app. Thank you.
Thanks so much.